Invite people to come forward. Don't start writing your questions just yet. Let me give you a little instruction. Unless you really have a burning question, then you can go ahead. Come, sit down. Come, get your questions. As people are coming forward, I'm going to go ahead and start to give the directions so that you can be thinking about what you're assigned to do here. All right, you're going to write up to three questions on index cards, okay? And here's my direction for you. One is write legibly. If you can, I want to be able to read it, right? So write it big and as legibly as you can. The goal in this form are genuine questions. This is not stump Mark, right? If you know the answer, then don't ask the question. You already know it. The question is, and not that I'm going to have all the answers, but what are you genuinely wondering about? That's the best question, right? Not gotcha questions. What do you wonder about? Now, I'm going to invite three areas, and if you did one per card, that would be great. It doesn't have to, I mean, I want to have it flow from you. The first is, do you have a question about the Bible or Jesus? Anything about the Bible? How it was written, how do you look, how do you read it, blah, blah, blah. Anything about that, or anything about Christ. I've always wondered this, or how do I understand that, whatever, okay? Another question could be about the faith or the church. Anything, what the Trinity or salvation or blah, blah, blah. Something about the faith or the church, the structure. I always wondered about this, or why does the Episcopal Church do that? Or liturgy, anything you want. And then the third one is anything. What's on your mind? I'm just curious. So go ahead, you can start thinking about that. And the goal here is, I don't have all the answers. That would be completely arrogant. But I want to engage with what is on your mind, and then open it up a little bit to other people. Maybe their comments, questions, disagreements with me. I would love somebody to disagree with me. That's perfectly fine. But we're also going to try to get through as many as we can. We can't go too deep on any question. I'm sorry, we're going to have to move along. But how many of these we can get through? When you're done, you can raise them up, pass them forward, or whatever you want to do. Yeah, if people need more cards. Pens. People in the back, did you all get those? No, you got to write it down. We're going to have a level playing field. And I'm not going to deceive you. I have my own questions that I'm adding into the mix, right? These are my seed questions. Oh yeah, I wish I had a hat. No, you just give them to me, and I will mix them up. Oh God. 8 already. Interesting. Uh-huh. That's great. They are. I don't remember who did it. Oh my gosh, these are fantastic. What else? Yeah. And they can keep coming. We're going to see how many we can crank through. I feel like I want to genuinely shuffle these so people have seen me do my card tricks. You don't know how much I'm planting this. Okay, as people are okay, some good Bible ones there. Wow. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm so tempted to read these through. You hand them to me. Hand them to me, thank you. You gotta put it on. Oh, will you please? Thank you. Okay. I'm sorry I'm gonna have to fly through some of these because there's so many good ones. Okay. How do you best keep your children want to attend service? You know, it sort of matters what age you're talking about too. My experience as a teenager and a tween is my friends were there. If I have community of other kids, which we do have a little bit of, that makes a huge difference. I want to be with some other kids. We try to engage them, you know, at the different children's worship is kind of even for a little of the younger kids. You know, I also, some families are like, what we do is we go to church and you're coming. I've seen that be successful in that, you know, it's part of the rhythm. You also, on the other hand, don't want to create this resistance, like I have to come to church. And so we try to make it as newcomer, as child-friendly as we can. Anyone want to comment about that? You've had any good luck helping your kids attend church? Beth, how do you keep your kids attending church?
I get them involved.
Get them involved.
Have to be there. And then the community piece for us has always been huge. Connecting with others and friends.
Being them involved. Uh-huh. Okay, I'm going to go on. This is a Bible question. How can we be sure that all the important stuff made it into the Bible? Seems like a lot of people had hands in the canonization process. That's a very sophisticated question. So you have to kind of, in my mind, you have to separate out a little bit the Old Testament and the New Testament. When you look at how the New Testament was created, I think it's pretty clear that very early on, they were reading, communities were gathering with the letters of Paul and the four Gospels. I think those were key. Communities gathered around those. Then there were these other letters in James and Revelation, and some of these, you know, it is a complicated process about what made it in and out. There are some things that did flow out. There's something called the Gospel of Thomas. It seems really early, that has some sayings from Jesus that did not make it in. So I can't say that everything Jesus said, there could be things outside that didn't make it in, but I think the core of who he was and the writings are there from the beginning. So even the things that are found outside the Gospels and outside our New Testament really don't add much. So I don't think there's anything floating out there that we're missing. And then my little bit of agenda, sometimes you'll see in the media, oh, we found the Gospel of Judas or the Gospel of Mary, and it's got all this stuff. Almost universally, those things were written 200, 300, 400 years later. And they're interesting to read, but I don't think anything's been uncovered that predates Paul's letters or those early Gospels, as a matter of fact. Let's read them, but I don't think they should be included or they should bump anything off. That's my personal opinion. Let's see. Why do we not something, the sacrament of confession in the Episcopal Church? Why do we not push the sacrament of confession in the Episcopal Church? That's a great question. So, we in the Episcopal Church, we say there are two main sacraments, baptism and Eucharist, and then there are 5 other sacramental rites. One of those is the sacrament of confession. We do have sacramental confession in our church. I have done it. I don't do it very often. So what would happen if you were raised in the Roman Catholic tradition? Somebody would make an appointment with me, and we would talk about how they want to do this, and they would make a confidential confession with me, probably in the church here. So that can definitely happen, especially if something is burdening you. I'm glad to play that role, or you might have other people. I don't control confession. Sometimes in that Catholic model, it's like you need me to forgive your sins. You don't need me, but I'm glad to be a vehicle for that. We also, as we did today, have a general confession. So there are chances every Sunday to make a confession. But does that help? I don't know. Raise your hand if you knew that we had sacramental confession. Okay, so some people knew that yeah, you can do that.
I would also say, Mark, just real quickly, that in the Episcopal Church, there's a broad spectrum of style of worship, and there are some who are much higher church and therefore much closer to Roman Catholicism.
Yes.
And that would become something more regular than that.
What is the best way to break down and study the Bible? That's a good question. So my recommendation is I would start with the Gospel of Mark. It's the shortest, it's the earliest. You get a kind of gripping story, you've heard it. So that's where I would start. I think the problem is if you start with Matthew, the first thing in Matthew is all these begets. It's a genealogy, and it's like, Mark starts right away. So I would read Mark, and then the next thing I would read would be one of Paul's letters. Try Romans, that's a little tricky, but go to Philippians or 1 Corinthians, and now you've got a feel for that, right? In the Old Testament, I think it's fine to start at the beginning, right? You go to Genesis, Exodus, that's pretty good, Leviticus. You're going to get bogged down, and so then you might go on to some of the prophets or the Psalms. So I'm sorry I'm proposing to jump around, but I do think that's helpful. Now, some of this, I'm going to look at Niels. He has a podcast where he is listening, taking it on through, right? With somebody who's commenting on it. Yeah, what's it called? Bible in a Year. So, and this is, he's Roman Catholic, the person. So, another aspect we're talking about is how do you get the resources that help you read this complicated document? So some Bibles you'll find are called an annotated, and that can help because you'll see at the bottom, it'll say Herod or something, and then at the a little A next, he lived here, right? So that can actually be helpful rather than just jumping in. Who was Isaiah? Sometimes they have a paragraph at the beginning. Who was Isaiah? What was going on? Or there are different kinds of commentaries. There's a guy named N.T. Wright who's written some, Mark for everyone or 1 Corinthians for everyone. So there are resources out there. You do have to be careful because, the Bible can be interpreted a lot of different ways. So if you need some direction about that, but my first recommendation for the person who wrote that is go Mark, something from Romans, see what else is, could try Acts, read through a little of New Testament, and then try the Old Testament from the beginning. Who picks the hymns each week? How do you decide? So Justin is our minister of music, and he and I work on that together. The canons of the church say that the rector is in charge of all worship and music. So ultimately, it's my choice, but I would be dumb not to draw on somebody with the skills of Justin. So we get together. And sometimes it's true that I will say, hey, I want these, and he says, oh, I want these, and we come together. I think one of the challenges is going outside of our hymnal, right? So we have a 1982 hymnal. That's the one I know best. And was trained, I had a rector who was very musical, so that's the one I know. So we try to go outside the hymnal. I don't know if you saw the closing hymn today with different words. That's from Wonder, Love, and Praise. This is an Episcopal hymnal that was created, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, with sort of more modern language. You know, my opinion is there are probably some gems in there, probably some real stinkers in there too. So, you know, how do you try a new hymn? How do you go outside of that? It's a good conversation. But ultimately, I decide, but we decide together. Is that fair, Justin? I'm not. How serious are the divisions within the overall Anglican communion? Serious. I think it's done. I think the way we have the Anglican communion. So let me step back. For people who don't understand, for people to get a concept, in the United States, and then actually there are other, you know, it includes Puerto Rico, I think Bolivia, and some other countries. This is the Episcopal Church, right? So we're a denomination, we have a presiding bishop, and that is our denomination. Around the world, because Britain was colonized many different countries, there's a similar one. So there's a church in New Zealand, there's an Anglican church in Australia, Canada, Scotland. So all these essentially countries, Africa has many different. The vision was, could all these denominations come together? So they have done that in the past. They would meet at this Lambeth conference. There has been a split. It was first over the ordination of women, then it was the ordination of gay and lesbian individuals. There were certain of these, particularly in Africa, that just couldn't go along with the United States as we moved ahead with those sort of ordinations. So it started to fray, and now I think it's irreparably broken. That I don't even know if they'll come together. Would you agree with that? What would you say about that, Flo? I had a bishop my bishop in California went to a Lambeth conference, and he was actually spit upon by one of the bishops from another denomination. What does that say? I mean, that's pretty bad. Christianity has undergone a lot of change over the last century. What is your optimistic vision for the next 100 years? Good question. So I was just at a conference of, it used to be the endowed Episcopal parishes, but it's a lot of the larger parishes in the United States came together, and I was hopeful. I mean, there are some bright people, there's a lot of resources, you know, you have moments. So let me say this is what I think is gonna happen. I think the large urban churches are gonna do great, and that puts us in a good place. The places that have some resources are able to survive anything. We can keep going. People are drawn to our programs, our music. The churches that are going to really suffer are the small rural churches. It's just hard for them. The average size of median size of an Episcopal church is 30. median size. So half of them are under 30 and half of them are over 30. You got churches that have, 200, 500, whatever. If churches like us are going to make it. But if you're a church of 20 people out in Garrett County, it's tough. How do you pay the insurance premium for the clergy or fix the gutters? You don't have enough resources. So I think that's sad, because there are places that are not going to have an Episcopal church for big distances, Montana or whatever. It's just going to be hard to have that happen. But Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, those churches I think are going to go on and maybe become stronger. That would be my optimistic vision. I also, and again, I can open this up to other people, I think we have a great product. I think in a world that is getting polarized, the Episcopal Church at its best is inclusive, can come together, brings meaning and community. Aren't people going to want to connect to Christ, connect to community? I don't foresee that changing in the next forever, or till the end time, or whatever. That's my sense, is that's what makes me optimistic. I even see in our congregation, I see changed lives. I see our youth who got confirmed. What a great group of 14 and 15-year-olds, savvy, who care about the church. I mean, that to me really bodes well for the future. If you can have, all the different ages present, when a little church gets only a group of 60-year-olds, what happens 10 years from now? Any comment about that? Do people buy that? Yeah, what were you going to say?
I think the question said Christianity, not just Episcopal.
Christianity. Well, I have less comment about that, because I don't know. I mean, when you see what they say is, the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons and the Pentecostals are growing, particularly in Africa and Central America. So that's just factual. Whereas if you went to England right now, it's empty, right? Huge cathedrals that are empty. So I think the U.S., this is my opinion, the U.S. is a very spiritual country. People go to church here, whereas is Europe the future, that we're going to be empty? I don't know that that's the case. But if you go to a lot of those, like particularly England, really struggling, I don't know. Anybody have an opinion about that? Are you hopeful? About the church? Timothy, you hopeful or not? Next 100 years? Do you think Jesus was exposed to Buddhism? No. No, I don't think he had enough stuff going on. Many Episcopal churches are named after saints. What does it mean for OSP to be named after St. Paul? How has or will that affect our ministry or program? That's interesting. So the Bishop of London in 1692 founded all these churches around, and we were the plant church in Baltimore, and our official name is St. Paul's Church, St. Paul's Parish of Baltimore County, because that was it. We had everything. And I'm not exactly sure why they chose that. Sometimes they chose that from the planting, vision of the Bishop of London. He had a St. Paul's Church, and he said, well, let's have that. One of the funny ones to me, so people ask about our name, Mother Church. You don't hear that much. Old St. Paul's, right? So when I was first called as rector here, some of my colleagues said, you got to change that, Old St. Paul's. And I'm like, I don't know, I kind of like it, I'm open to, I don't feel like it restricts us. It does say, okay, we've been around a long time. There was another St. Paul's Parish in Pigtown, St. Paul the Apostle, and that's when we became old, because we actually founded that church and supported that church, so we became old. The other funny one is, I remember when there was this talk of changing the name, a woman came up to me and said, we can't change Old St. Paul's. It's always been Old St. Paul's. And I thought, well, not always. I mean, there was a time when it was new, right? So I think I adore St. Paul. I think he is an inspiration. He's got his issues, for sure. I don't know how it impacts us in particular, because even as a patron saint, we don't really, we pick our annual meeting close to his date. But I don't know, do you all feel like Paul is particularly beloved here? I love him, but you know, it's a great name, but I don't know how, I wouldn't say it impacts us necessarily. For the sermon, how do you decide when to reference current events? Could you do it more often? Sermon writing is really tricky or wonderful. So I am of the plan ahead version. I have a buddy who does it Saturday night. I can't do that. I'm not that creative. So I'm way, way ahead, thinking, reflecting on them, and that's how I function, trying to listen to the Spirit. How can you, I mean, some of a sermon is, how can you break open the readings to have good news for our congregation? That's what it is, right? The goal is, it's about the readings, and it's about what is going on. Now, current events are obviously on people's minds. We also know that something happens Tuesday, and then something else happens Friday, right? And responding to trends, it's really, really tricky. You know, after 9/11, if you didn't talk about that on Sunday, you're doomed, right? Of course. But I also, let me say this, sometimes there's politicians who try to grab attention. And I don't know that that's always as helpful, to grab at everything that's happening, every statement or provocative thing. So I'm tricky with that. I will say to you, I'm not going to talk about Donald Trump from the pulpit. I don't want to be partisan. Are there trends going on in our world right now that he's involved in? Absolutely, and that should be talked about. How do you be political without being partisan? Is a dance about how to do that. I also, one of the formative things for me, I was a seminarian, and the rector preached a sermon about nuclear disarmament. And it was like, oh, it was powerful, and listened. And the next Sunday I went to church, and he preached another sermon about nuclear disarmament. And I went, you know, I'd like a little about Jesus. I know, that was me. I was like, you know, is nuclear disarmament important? Am I the expert on that? I don't think you want to hear me talking about nuclear disarmament. So I'm laying it out. That's how I sort it out. Of sometimes the current event is so timely or trend, it needs to be talked about. I also know that when you're in this pulpit, it's a gift, and you can't talk back to me. And that's also almost makes it more precious how you use those words. If it's a one-way conversation, me telling you, I don't want to do that. Let's do that in a forum. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the issues of the day, but you know, you've got a trapped audience there, so I take that seriously. That's me. Any comments about that? Questions about that? Because yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Okay. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, I want to hear the good news. I don't like the news is draining and we don't know what's really true.
And I'm not the expert, right? You know, I have opinions about gun control and the death penalty and this and that, and I don't.
Also, what you said, it feels more like a teaching.
It does.
Less like this is what you have to do or believe.
I think people are coming on Sunday, and they're, you know, going through a divorce, or they're pet has died, and they, you know, you got to speak to the variety of people. And we have 10-year-olds, and we have PhDs, and we have, you know, people, a variety. That makes such a challenge to preach, is all the different denominations people come from. So saying on Jesus and the good news will address the issues of the day, I'm confident. What do Episcopalians think about the Pope? Our official title is he's a bishop of the church. We honor that he's a bishop. He has good things to say. He's from Chicago, right, this guy? And, you know, there's certain moments that he's saying some things. I go, yes. I also, this is me, I don't cut the Roman Catholic Church and the popes much slack about how they deal with women and gay, LGBTQ. That, you know, look how progressive. Yeah, on some things, we serve at Our Daily Bread. That's a Roman Catholic organization. They're fantastic. But there are also some ways that I can't cheer him on because he has not progressed in some of the places that I want the church to go. That's me. So Episcopalians, he's a bishop of the church, and he deserves to be honored as a bishop. Why does Easter fall on different dates of the calendar? You guys have some great questions. Okay, this is just factual, right? It's the Sunday after the solstice, right? So it has to do with the moon, which shows how ancient a dating this is. So when you go out the week of Easter, you will see a full moon. That's how the date is chosen and why it keeps moving around. Unfortunately, I know more about this than you want to even know, because I heard a podcast about how the Orthodox Church does it differently, has a different dating system. We're the Gregorian calendar, they're a different calendar. And so sometimes they're 2 weeks apart. And so we don't much interact with the Eastern Orthodox Church, but they're, you know, one of us will be in Lent while the other's in Easter, and they were trying to come together. It'll never happen. But that's what happens. It's based on the moon, and it's coming up. Oh my gosh. How do we reconcile faith and war? You know, in the just war theory, it's part of our history, there are all these permutations about how a war could happen. No combatants killed, it's done, you know, in a certain way. And if you've ever heard Chris Dreisbach, who was an ethicist here, he could tell you all about the just war theory and how a people of faith can support a war within certain boundaries, you know, to stop the Nazis from, you know, the Holocaust. Who's gonna, I would say, yes, we need to do that. I think we start with Jesus saying, put away your swords, right? A person of non-violence from beginning to end makes it really hard to talk about war. As a Christian, so you've got, and I think our new bishop, you know, said that she is somebody who, you know, would stand against any war at all. You know, those are tricky questions. Let's start with our nonviolent Savior, and then how do we also protect people and protect ourselves becomes a secondary question that's important. Any comments or questions? I don't have an answer to that one. What are we going to say, David?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, right, war is an extension of politics by another means, and that is just not a domain in which I think Jesus lives. I think Jesus is living within individual relationships and interactions, and so thinking about war and conflict as a political domain of
tricky, isn't it? And we also know that in the very earliest church, one of the things they said, if you were in the military, you had to drop out, be a Christian. To get baptized, you could not be a soldier. Now, that's not true today, and we want to honor the gifts and sacrifices of our military at the same time, but it's a complicated backstory. What are the best family movies about Jesus? I don't know. Veggie Tales? I don't know. Do you? I kind of turn to the young people with young kids. Do you all watch anything, Francine, of family movies about Jesus? Veggie Tales, okay. Oh gosh, some of these are, okay. We're running out of time here, but let's go. How does a person learn to pray? Wow, that's a great question. One of my favorite sayings is, pray as you can, not as you can't. And so some of the time, people feel like, oh, I have to be a monk and sit 30 minutes of silence, and that's real prayer. Let's not start to rank things. What works for you? Somebody will say, well, I love to walk in nature. That's when I feel close to God. Do that, right? Do those things. Now, does it take some discipline? That's some of the next steps. Setting aside some time, making room in your life for prayer, trying to learn what works for you. And then I and other people can give recommendations of, books, or how do you pray with Scripture? There's lots of information about good ways to open up and read a psalm and sit there with it. My experience is a lot of times people feel like I'm not doing it right. You ever feel that way? I'm too distracted, or I'm not doing it right. And Paul says we can't pray as we want, right? So this is if you feel that way, welcome to the club. And there are ways to learn and grow in praying. But I would start with what's working for you, and then try to have that and be in a more regular way, right? If you can set that aside, that's a great lead. How do you know what God's will is? Know what God's will is. I don't think you know for sure, right? We start with a humble perspective. In the Episcopal Church, we have things like Scripture, tradition, and reason we talk about. So those can help us. What might Scripture say? What has the tradition said? What is my heart and mind saying? It's back to praying. I also think we talk about a term like discernment. That's better done in community, right? We know that some people think something is God's will and they haven't talked to anybody else. If you have a crazy idea and you wonder if it's God's will, why don't you talk to somebody who you trust, right? Of sorting that out. So I think those are helpful. Draw on every resource you can. Have some humility about it. Talk to other people. And on the flip side, I do think God is guiding us. I think God is guiding each and every person here of different directions, nudging us. And it does take some listening, but it's there. There's nobody here who can't figure out God's will at all. You can. The tricky ones are going to take more complication. Why do we do the Eucharist every Sunday? I think if you go to the earliest church, they were modeling what Jesus had wanted them to do, right? When you do this in remembrance of me. They had a pattern of gathering for meals because they were Jewish people. The meals started to change a little bit, right? It was a meal with food early on, and then the meal disappeared, and then it moved to Sunday. So that's how it happened, and so they were doing it every Sunday. That's the early, by about, I'm going to say 150 AD, no meal, and every Sunday Christians were gathering. If you look at our history, that hasn't always been the case. So in the Middle Ages and before the Reformation, people weren't allowed to receive the bread and wine. It was done much less frequently. in like the 1776 even, in the new prayer book, a lot of people, and this church when I arrived, they were doing something called morning prayer, right? So, which was not Eucharist. The big thing that happened recently was the 1979 prayer book. That prayer book really pushed forward. We're going to have the central act on Sunday is the Eucharist. This is the way you build community. This is the way people are going to connect. I guess those are two different questions. There's the history of it. Why do we do it? The Oxford movement in England of the 1830s and our 79 prayer book brought Eucharist to the center, and we live in that time. Why we do it is because it's our central act. This is the way we become a community, is we celebrate the bread and wine together. We do an action together, not just thinking, not just speaking. We eat together as a way to be formed as a Christian community. Any question about that? That makes sense? Wow, these are good questions. If evil people like Hitler go to heaven, how is that fair? If anyone was at my forum on universalism, so I'm in the universalism camp, that everyone goes to heaven. Everything that's been created is going to be redeemed. Is that solid in the New Testament? No, it's not. You can find it, but I think there's plenty to talk about hell and judgment in the New Testament, so I'm not going to deny that. But I'm still a universalist, and my great Saint Origen of Alexandria of the 200s, he was a big universalist, so it has a long history. That doesn't seem fair, though. I think that's where purgatory has a lot. You know what purgatory is? The people who go to, when you die, you have to work your way up to get purified. I don't know, somehow logically that makes some sense, right? I think I need to be purified. But I think God's grace, my sense is God is going to be more loving and merciful than I can even imagine. And so I just start there. I don't know what happens in the afterlife, but the God who created everything, the God of Jesus Christ, is as more forgiving than me, so away we go. Any comment about that? How is that fair that Hitler gets into heaven? Origen said even the devil will get into heaven. God's going to wait out everybody, which is. I know, doesn't it? Wow.
How do we raise our kids to say, you're not going to heaven? I feel like my parents were like, if you do that, you go to hell.
So I'm actually over. I have one. These are totally random because this is such a good one. What do you believe happens when you die? What a great question. I have this sense like some of what you do in prayer is you hand yourself over to God. You're saying, God, I'm trying to give myself over. I'm trying to trust you. I think that's what happens when you die, is you turn yourself over. I think if we're going to try to be true to the New Testament and the theology, when you die, I think you die. I think every one of us actually does die. It's not like sort of die. You have to die. And then on Easter, we proclaim resurrection. God will do something new with us. God is going to create something new. I don't know. And again, Paul, our great Paul, we shall be changed, he says. We'll be something else. Something wonderful is the pointing. Some people say they know what this is. Do I think they're harps? I hope not, right? Harps and clouds. I think all of those are picture language of trying to say, it's okay when we die, we can turn ourselves over. This God is going to take care of us and love us. We will be changed. I don't know what that's going to be like, but that's the beautiful vision. And that's why we can come and be sad at a funeral. They're always sad. And we can say Alleluia, because God isn't finished with anybody. Even at death, I think God is going to take us and continue to look out for us. That's my last one. Thank you. I'm sorry if I didn't get, thank you. If I didn't get to your cards, I will look these through and think about these and appreciate all of these and try to work them into a sermon maybe. Okay, yes, exactly. That's okay.